Release the Kraken!
This video is brought to you by Rocket Flip, an annoyingly addicting action clicker game that'll have you breaking your phone in no time. Head over to lameduckstudios.com and become an alpha tester today. Only available on Android. Good evening, fellow game designers. Ron here at Lame Duck Studios. And here we are back in Maya 2018. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to my channel box. So we're going to look at the different visibility modes and work modes that we can have in Maya. Right now I have this object. I'm going to go ahead and swap this out for a cube just because it's easier to see some of this stuff. Scale that up. And if you don't remember where your scaling tool is, it's right there if you need it, to the left. You can also press the R key to get to scale. Ooh, your first hotkey. So, right off the bat, we have spacebar. We know that one. That changes the viewport. Okay. We have Q, which brings us back to our pointer. You can see that over here. If I type W, it brings up the moving or translation widget, and now I can move this along the axis. Or I can grab the middle and drag it wherever I like. The E key brings up rotation. I know R should be rotation, but it isn't. E is rotation. That allows me to turn this in various ways. And you can see that updating inside of our channel box. So you can see the translation, that's the position on the screen inside the viewport. The rotation, X, Y, and Z rotation here. And the scaling, X, Y, and Z. Now, of course, we have X, Y, and Z, three points because we're in 3D space. X being the left and right, Z being forward, and Y being up. If you're working in Unreal, those are flipped. X is forward, Y is left and right, and Z is up inside of Unreal, but we'll get to that at some later point. And then down here, we have the polycube. If you open that up, these are our initializers. Whenever you first create an object, these will be here. After you've done some work to it, this will disappear. So getting back to it, so Q is the pointer, W is the translation, E is rotation, and R is scale. And this little guy is from pressing T, so if I click off and select them again, you can press T and I'll bring that up. So this is just a detachment of these stats here. I'm going to go ahead and hit Q to get rid of that. Y is to bring up the last thing that you did. So the last thing that I did was utilize this tool. So for example, if I grab this tool up here, doesn't matter what I grabbed, I'm just going to grab one. You can see it pops over here. And if I do something, yada, 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 move out, don't worry about the error. Then if I press Y again, you can see it grabs the last tool that I used. Pretty handy. Okay. If I right-click inside of my viewport here, you'll get a various menu. So if I'm on the object, I'll get something like this. If I'm out here, I might get something else. So it depends on what mode you're in. I can also hold down Shift and right-click, and it'll give me another set of modes. And this is based on the various object you're working on. So in this case, I'm hovering over a face. This is the flat side. Hold Shift right click, it'll give me face modification tools. If I go into edge mode, hold down Shift and right click, it'll give me a different menu for modifying edges. And if I hover over a vertex, grab one of those, hold Shift right click, it'll give me options for modifying vertices. Okay, so those are the submenus. If I hold right click, it'll just give me the basic menu change, and you have some other assets down here as well. If I come up to the left, we have our working modes. So we are in modeling, and when modeling is open, you can see this top bar here. We have mesh, edit mesh, tools, display, and so on. Whenever I change this, anything after the Windows tab will change based on the working mode that I'm in. So if I go down to rigging, you can see after Windows I get skeleton, skin, deform, constrain, everything that deals with working on a skeleton or animation rig. If I come down to animation, I'll get the key and playback and visualize and animation constraints. If I come down to FX, I'll get the FX tab for particles and hair and cloth. And then rendering will bring up lighting, shading, texturing, rendering, and so on. So these are various work modes, and you can create your own if you want. To cycle through these, you can press F1. F1 is help. F2 is modeling. I can't press them because I have the recording going, and it'll turn the recording off. But F3 would be the next one down, so F3 would be rigging, and then F4 is animation, F5 FX, F6 is rendering. Okay, F7 is multi-select. What multi-select lets you do, and if I right-click on here and I go down to multi, that means that I can select multiple things. So I can hover over a face or an edge or a vertex. If I press F8, that brings us back into object mode. Again, I can't use the hotkey because I have the recording going, but I'll go ahead and right-click on here, and I will go to object mode. So object mode is object selection, and you can see that here. So if I want, I can move the object around, right? F9 takes us into vertex mode. I can select a vertex, I can move it, do various things to it. You cannot scale a vertex. Scaling a vertex does nothing. Conversely, rotating a vertex does nothing. But you can rotate and scale a pair. So if I grab two of them and do this, right? And if I bring up my scaling tool, again, that's R. I can just, The next one up, F10, that brings up edge mode. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. I can work with the edge. You can scale an edge. You can move the edge. You can rotate the edge. Ooh, fancy. Now we're becoming modelers. Check it out. Now if I go ahead and go into F11, that brings up face mode. And you can see here it's changing there. So it's face mode, edge mode, and so on. So here's face. I can modify that. I can shrink it, scale it, translate it, or move it. And then F12 brings us into UV mode, which is right here. I can also right-click and get there. So UV and UV. UVs are dealing with texture coordinates, but we'll get into that later. You can't modify UVs out here in the 3D space. You can only do that in the UV editor. So you can see I can select it, but I can't do anything to it. If I right-click, I can go to Vertex Face. Vertex Face is good for looking in between the various pieces of the geometry. So you can see if you have anything hidden in here or how they're connecting. To move, you can hold down the Alt key, and then if you left-click, you can turn your camera. So basic navigation. If I hold down Alt and right-click, I can dolly the camera in and out nice and smooth. If I don't hold Alt and I use the scroll wheel, you can see it steps in and out. Step versus dolly. Okay. If I hold down Alt and then middle mouse click, press it on the mouse wheel, you can pan the camera. If you're out in the viewport and you hold down the middle mouse button and you drag, nothing's going to happen unless you have something selected. So if I come up to channel box, let's go into object mode here. Let's say I grab this translation X, hold down the middle mouse button, no Alt this time, just the middle mouse button, and I drag. So this gives me an actionable event. You can see that. And I can do that with any of these. So if I want to just move this without having to actually click on it, select it, and then you can middle mouse click and move it. Same thing, I can grab these and I can scale it using the middle mouse button. Okay, so those are the hotkeys from F1 all the way through F12. Now we're going to go through display hotkeys. So we're looking at our object currently in what's called rough display. We're actually in rough shaded. So you have rough, and you have rough wireframe, and then rough shaded. Shaded is the faces are filled in. So 1 is rough. 2 is smooth preview. So it's going to show you an outline of your object. This is why we chose a cube, so you can see the rough outline is nice here. But you can also see that when we smooth it, it'll try to make a cube into a sphere. You can see that here. It's saying, hey, when you smooth this, this is what it's going to be. If you want to view the preview without having the wireframe, press 3. But this is just a preview. It's a lie. So if you're to try to send this over to a game engine or something, it would still be a cube. It'll only be real if you do a smooth operation on it. The next one over, 4, is wireframe. So if you want to see the outline of your model. If you want to bring shaded back up, you press 5. If you want to see a texture, you press 6. Now we don't have a texture on here, but if we want to add one, let's go ahead and go over to our attributes. Open that up. All the way at the end, we have Lambert 1, which is the default material. If I come in here and just grab the checker to the right of our color, come down, just going to grab this checker pattern in our list here. Now we have a texture, and you can see if I press 5, it just gives me the shaded. Press 6, it gives me the texture. And you can see that's toggling the little action up here. And I can click that as well. Okay. 7 turns on lights. So if you press 7 and it turns dark, that means you don't have a light. Let's go up to rendering here. And I'm going to add a light. And now you can see the light is working. Ooh. To turn the light back off, just press 5 or 6, and that'll turn that light off. So you really can't see the difference because this light fills everything in. Go ahead and get rid of that one. I'll get this little arrow looking one here. This is our directional light. Go ahead and scale that up just so you can see it. I'll press 7, and now you can see with that on, you can see the light is coming from here. There's a shadow. If I press 5, no more shadow. 6, no more shadow. 7, shadow. All right, so to turn that off, it's 5 or 6. We'll turn that off. 8 does nothing. 9 does nothing. 0, you can see down here, we have a result, and that is setting it back to default display. Right? So you can actually see if I press 1, 2, 3, you can see these are all changing. 4, 5, 6, 7. Something's happening. 8, nothing, nothing, and then 0, something. Right? So you can see that there. So those are our display modes. So we have 1 is rough, 2 is smooth preview, 3 is our smooth, 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is textured, 7 is lights, and then 0 is back to default. Now there are a lot more hotkeys in Maya. We could be here all day going over every single one, but I do want to cover 2 more that are really handy. Actually, I take that back. 3 more that are really handy. First one is the J key. So if I go into rotation and I hold down J, that lets me snap rotation. If I don't hold it down, it's smooth rotation. The G key will redo the last thing that I did. So we have Y opens up the second tool, but G does the last thing perform. So if I go ahead, let's go into polygons here. I'll go into face mode. Let me grab this face. And I'll just use the extrude button. I'll just pull that out. Don't worry about the actual detail. But so I did an action, right? That action was extruding. If I grab this face and I press G, it extrudes again. And then I can just pull that out. And I can do that over and over and over. So G, it re-extrudes, makes another. G, re-extrude, make another. So it does your last action, right? Ooh. The next one is duplicating. So you have the option to copy and paste, of course. Control C. Yeah. And then Control V work. So if I go ahead and do that, it did copy and paste. But copy and pasting is your standard action, right? Control C and then Control V, right? Plus you get that irritating menu. If you're using the student version, Control C, it brings up the menu, you're doing this, yada yada yada, Control V, it gives you that menu. But if you duplicate, it duplicates in place and you don't have to do anything special. So Control D duplicates in place, and now I have another one. Control D, duplicate, Control D. Very handy stuff. Your usual other things work as well, like Control S saves it. Those are pretty standard, but for Maya specific, we have snapping. So if I grab the object, hold down the X key, that snaps to the grid. So pieces of the grid it'll snap to. Okay. If I hold down, and it's actually easier if I'm on the grid down here, you can see the different grid squares. You can see that jitter. And if I hold down the V key, this snaps to the nearest vertex. So if I grab this and I snap, you can see it snap into this object's vertex. And that's pretty handy. Snap that back down to the grid here. And you can see that X is here, and then V is this one. You can also snap to a spline and other pieces as well. Okay. Okay, so that is a look at the hotkeys in Maya and the view modes as well. Hopefully that's been educational for you. And the next one we'll go over lights and shading. Hey guys, thanks for checking out my channel. Misty and I both thank you. If you enjoyed that video you just watched, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon. I also have a Teespring store where you can get official Lame Duck Studios merch, hoodies and t-shirts and that sort of thing. Also, Rocket Flip is on its way out, is in alpha testing right now. Just a very, very simple action clicker game. It's pretty fun. You're welcome to head over to lameduckstudios.com and sign up to get access to that early. Help me test it and suggestions and whatever not that kind of go into the development process. I would make it a better game overall. My usual posting schedule is I create new content on Sundays and I release content on Wednesdays. With the summer kind of rolling out, I'm getting back into the usual schedule, so stay tuned and I shall see you next time.